The world of Hunter x Hunter is one where a person's ability to express themselves is limited only by their own creativity and ambition. A hunter's license grants one free rein to explore the endless unknown, and through the mastery of Nen, characters are able to give themselves the specific tools they need to fulfill their desires. With so many possibilities in play and so much emphasis placed on the individual, the setting is seemingly designed to favor self-interest and greed. Yet this is rarely the case. More often than not, it is the selfish and narrow-minded whose actions come up short, either because their will isn't strong enough to aim higher, or because their conviction is so strong that they lose sight of the world around them. A core component of Hunter x Hunter is taking the time to appreciate the journey. Enjoy the little detours to the fullest, because that's where you'll find the things more important than what you want. Amidst the expanding narrative, Gon and Killua go through training arc after training arc just to learn and refine the basics of Nen. And as they do this, they gain as much knowledge and fun out of their environment as they can. At Heaven's Arena, Gon prepared himself for Hisoka by fighting the initiation goons. In Yorknew, the appraisal techniques the boys learned from Zapile came in handy against the Phantom Troop. Greed Island was basically built from the ground up to be a game that guides its players through essential applications of Nen, to the point where a technique's difficulty was measured by the rating on the monster card that reflected it. After all of that effort, it's in Chimera Ant that we finally begin to see their fully realized abilities take shape. It takes almost 200 chapters for these boys to start using their signature moves, but when they do, they've earned it. They've considered how to utilize these techniques in combat, they're aware of potential shortcomings, there's substance behind the style. In contrast to that is someone like Cheetu, a character I've surprisingly become fascinated with recently for reasons unknown. Okay, so he's a dumbass cat boy and I have a soft spot in my heart for dumbasses and cat boys, I'm sorry. Fitting then that the character I find to be aesthetically appealing gives no mind to practicality and is only concerned about what looks or sounds flashy. As part of the Chimera Ant collective, he was already someone who sought to do things his own way. But it was only after setting out on his own that Cheetu could reach the depths of his uselessness. His brief encounter with Knuckle and Morel reveals a tendency to treat fights like a performance. When he's on top, the Speed King acts like a royal bastard, mocking his opponents and goading them to continue the game. Yet the moment he loses control, he throws a tantrum and quits. His rage blinds him to the most basic of basics, Zetsu, an ability that wild animals are predisposed to learning intrinsically. Yet Cheetu, who has the genes of a natural predator within him, fails to pick up on this simple technique. To make matters worse, he doesn't confront his flaws in the moment. He instead looks for the quickest possible shortcut. Nen is handled a bit differently in this arc. The once foreign and mysterious power system is granted to the Chimera Ants matter-of-factly. There's no effort, there's nothing special about it. But that method of integration serves a narrative purpose. Cheetu didn't unlock his Nen through training or his environment. His Nen ability is gifted to him by Shiapoof. He doesn't earn anything. And because he doesn't earn anything, he takes his gifts for granted. Part of the reason why Morel comes off as such a badass is because of Cheetu. One is a calm, no-nonsense veteran with a versatile ability that can fit just about any scenario, and the other is an impulsive, incompetent buffoon whose power works against him. They're polar opposites, and they play off each other perfectly. The fight they have could be written off as pure comedy relief, and for how dark the Chimera Ant arc is rightfully painted as, Cheetu's role in balancing the toll is commendable. But it's more significant than that. Morel could just as easily have beaten Cheetu without saying anything, but instead of doing that, he actively tries to teach Cheetu a lesson. His verbal jabs aren't just insults, they're thinly veiled instructions on what Cheetu is doing wrong. And when he explains how he defeated the childish cheetah, it isn't just to clue the audience in on what happened, it's framed as advice to his adversary. This makes sense given Morel's status as a mentor figure, and that personality is reflected through his students, most notably Knuckle. Even though the Chimera Ants are supposed to be his enemy, Morel still respects them to some extent. He doesn't overlook the threat that they pose, nor does he ignore their humanity when he sees it, and that methodology has major ramifications during the arc's climax. Yet Cheetu's response is just as indicative of his character. He's ignorant and unwilling to improve. Instead of learning from his defeat and using that knowledge to craft a more useful technique, he banks on a newer, better one being handed to him. If he had truly sought evolution, he wouldn't have restricted himself with the condition that losing would cost him his ability. Gon and Killua's journey shows that failure is inevitable. True strength comes not from one's refusal to fall, but from the resolve to continue picking themselves back up. Cheetu lacks that resolve. He's incapable of any serious self-evaluation, and as a result, he stagnates. He doesn't completely disregard Morel's advice after such a humiliating loss, but his takeaway is the most inconsequential thing he could have possibly learned. Keep your eyes on your opponent. Great job, Cheetu. You're a fucking genius. Remember when I said that Cheetu takes his gifts for granted? Consider the glorious tradition of the mid-battle power-up. The protagonist gets backed into a corner, their reserves exhausted. But in a crucial moment of personal and physical development, they surpass their limits and discover an inner strength they didn't know they possessed. I could list example after example after example. It's a trope, no doubt, but it's hype as hell. Hunter x Hunter doesn't have many of these moments, so the fact that Cheetu has one makes him kinda special. Pulling an ability out of thin air is unpredictable and dangerous. But, of course, this is Cheetu we're talking about. His solution doesn't work at all. It is a downgrade, slower than his base speed, and it only serves to reinforce the notion that he doesn't want to progress. His dignity is not saved, and I feel markedly dumber giving him some sort of credit for this. At least his stupidity is endearing. Hunter x Hunter creates a world and a power system where people can freely express and represent themselves in whatever way they choose. They can create their own ability however they want it, with even restrictions being self-imposed. But amidst all of that is Cheetu the dumbass. He pays no mind to the mechanics, he doesn't care about how his ability works, he just wants it to look cool. This line of thinking runs counter to perhaps the biggest core theme in the series, and that makes him a brilliant minor antagonist. He thinks he's hot shit, but he's complete fodder. He doesn't have a significant influence on anyone's character arc, he's just a bump in the road. His battles don't further the plot in any meaningful way, they're detours. And while everyone else is reaching the culmination of their development during the palace invasion, Cheetu dies anticlimactically, from someone randomly falling out of the sky. There's something kinda relatable in that, a desire for something more that ultimately leads to repeated mistakes, seemingly different approaches running into the same pitfalls every time. The same cycle repeats itself on loop, as if I keep banging my head against the same wall, hoping one day it'll break before I do. Will anything come of this, or do I simply exist to be someone else's distraction?